Hey guys, Isaac Eicher here. Thanks for joining me for this instructional video all about scales, arpeggios, and patterns to learn the mandolin fretboard. This information really could serve multiple purposes. If you're a beginner and you don't know scales, this is essential information. And I can guarantee you're going to come away with a wealth of knowledge that will take you to the next level of your playing. If you're an intermediate player and maybe you already know some of these scales or some of these patterns, there's so much information here that can be utilized as you're practicing, where you progressively speed up the tempos or you practice different fingerings. And this is going to be a technique builder either way. All of these components, we're talking about scales and arpeggios, and then the patterns that you can create from those are the basic building blocks of music, of melodies and licks and just musical phrases. So if you learn this material or spend any time studying it, it is definitely going to help you get to the next level and help you learn songs more easily and help you just jam in different keys and understand where you are on the mandolin neck. Now, why did I choose the key of A major? Well, it's a common key for mandolin music, bluegrass repertoire, probably because it has the open strings, A and E, which we're going to see, that's what we're going to be playing with. But also, the key of A major is very symmetrical. So looking at first position, it just makes a lot of sense to figure out this key and build an understanding of the mandolin fretboard from that starting point. Then we're going to look at the key of C major, which is definitely a very common key, also for stringed instruments or whatever instruments. And it also gives us a different group of fingerings across the strings. So there's going to be overlap in some ways with the key of A major. The same shapes can be transposed to the new key, but between these two keys, you can cover a lot of ground. And I also wanted to include some information about A minor, because playing in minor keys is just as valuable as playing in major keys. And at the end of the video, we're going to have some comments and some discussion about how you can take this information and keep practicing and growing and building from there. Okay, we're ready to start out with the A major scale. And just to preface this, you need to know that a scale is made up essentially of 7 notes. And then if you add the octave or your starting note on top, that's 8 notes, right? And that's why they call it the octave. A major scale has a formula. Now, you don't really need to memorize this, but it's kind of cool to know that it's whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. I think you should memorize it on the mandolin fretboard. Now, what we're talking about, you most likely learned in elementary school or when you were a child in terms of do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? So let's look at this on the mandolin fretboard. So what we're going to do is play this A note here on the G string, which is the 2nd fret, and ultimately we're going to work this in first position, right? So that's where our first finger is covering the first 2 frets, our second finger covers the 3rd and 4th fret, and then our third finger will cover the 5th and 6th frets. Now, our first starting note, we're going to do this in the first octave, the lowest octave that we can on the mandolin. So my first finger goes here on A. Then I have my second finger on B, which is the 4th fret. And then I've got C sharp with my 3rd finger on the 6th fret. And then D, you can play that open. And now the cool thing is you're going to play the same thing on the next string, on the D string. So we've got 2nd fret E, then F sharp, then G sharp, and then A. And you can play open A, or later we'll see how you could also play this with your 4th finger, your pinky finger. So the way I've written this out, you know that we're in A major, but it has a key signature. So that means that the sharp notes are not notated on the note directly, but it's on the staff right by the treble clef. So you can see that we're playing C sharp, F sharp, and G sharp. Now when you're exercising this, you want to play with a good tone and play through the string and really have your mandolin resonate. Let's play the A major scale with all downstrokes. Go back down. Good. For the purposes of exercising this, we're going to do this faster, and I'm going to use alternating pick strokes. So that would sound like this. And as you're exercising this, you can really increase the tempo and build up. What if you do it faster? I want to point something out. The way I've written this scale out, we're going all the way up to A, and then I'm starting over repeating the A note and then walking down again, right? But another way to do this would be not to repeat the top note. So you can just walk up. And that actually is beneficial as well, because what you're doing is you're playing different pick strokes for all of those notes on the way down, as opposed to the other version where you're starting with repeating A. So be. So how do we play the A scale on the next octave? Starting on the open A string, we're going to play from here up to this octave. So we've got open A, now B, C sharp, D, and conveniently, we're going to do the same fingering on the next string. Let's go down. We can do the same thing we did before and increase our speed and practice this with alternating pick strokes. Or I can not repeat that top note. So what does it sound like when we play both octaves together? This is an important exercise also. You could go down. Just for the purposes of learning the mandolin fretboard, I want to show you this A scale, the last octave that we can do on the mandolin fretboard. So this is the third octave up the neck. We're going to start here on A, and I'm going to go from this A all the way up to here to this A. That's all the way to the 17th fret. And there's a couple different ways you can do this fingering, but these are the notes. So I'm starting on A, and I'm walking up in the same way we did down here. I'm going to grab that D note with my fourth finger. Now I can shift and start on E just like we did here. So we've got. Another way you could see this would be to start right here. Of course, it's getting really cramped on these smaller frets, but that's one way to do it. You could maybe go. Now, I'm assuming you've spent a week hammering away at the scale and you really have it under your fingers. When I was first starting out, that was the first thing I learned, was the major scale. Now we're going to make it a little bit more interesting. We're going to do this alternating pattern where we stair step, where we skip a note and then come back down. Let's play this together slowly. A, C sharp, B, D, C sharp, E, and so on. A little bit faster now. A little faster. The next pattern is very similar, but let's start on this A note here on the 5th fret of the E string. And we're going to do the same type of stair stepping. I'm going to jump a note. So I'm going to go A down to F sharp, then back to the G sharp in the middle of those. And then I'm going to keep that pattern going all the way down here till here. A little faster. And a little bit faster still. So if I really want to hammer away and drill these fingerings, I can take this same exercise, but I'm just going to take the first 2 notes and I'm going to drill those and repeat those, let's say 4 times. And then I'm going to do the next 2 notes 4 times, and it'll sound like this. So what we just looked at, you're going to see that there are different options for the fingerings that you can do. Really, I just want you to focus on learning where the notes are, because you can utilize the different fingerings in the different contexts of songs or licks you're trying to play. But the next thing we're going to focus on is a different pattern. Now we're going to group together 4 notes, and it's going to sound like this. Walk up the scale. Now go back down to A. Now I'll go to B and do the same thing. And so on. And so then we can really work on other aspects like making it sound more fluid, or even your right hand technique and making it sound good with a good tone. So maybe I really like this type of alternating pattern. Yes, it sounds like we're playing the scale, but we're actually doing something that sounds more interesting, and it's kind of telling its own little story through this pattern. Let's do a similar pattern now, but ultimately we're descending, so we're going to start up here and end up down here. And this note combination is also a group of 4 notes, and I'm going to go like this. I'm going to walk down the scale, and then come back up to this A note, and then go down to the next group of 4 notes, and so on. So you can easily change and shift down. So you're using these 3 fingers to capture those 3 notes like this. Okay, now that you've learned these patterns, what if you took a pattern idea like this, but you made it more interesting, more musical, and added a different rhythm? So this same group of notes that we used before, I mean, we're using the same notes from the same scale, but we're going to do something that adds a little bit of rhythmic interest. I'm going to play this specific rhythm, and then I'm going to do that theme through every measure. So Here's another rhythmic pattern, kind of like the last one. You're going to see it's just putting space kind of every couple notes. And I don't know if this is something I would play fast, but it could be faster. What if we did the same type of rhythmic pattern, but now descending? So maybe a little faster. So still working with this same type of pattern. I know they kind of sound similar, but here's even a different variation that might be easier to play faster if we do all eighth notes. So I'm going to do 2 eighth notes on A, jump up to C sharp, and then back to A. So it's like, now do the same thing up to the next group of notes, starting on B, and so on. This one's kind of fun to do. It's very musical. I could see playing this in some type of song. What if we do the same type of idea but now descending? We're actually going to play A 2 times, and then the next note over, which is G sharp, and then F sharp. So it sounds like this. So the next topic we're going to look at is the arpeggio. So if you played an arpeggio from the A major scale, the A major arpeggio, we're talking about doing a selection of notes from that scale. The first, the third, and the fifth notes. So 3 notes will give us an arpeggio. And you could play the octave again, but if we played the first, third, and fifth notes of the A major scale, it would sound like this. And there's with the A on top. To get really comfortable with this fingering and developing some muscle memory, feel free to just take this group of notes and really drill this. So the next place on the neck where we can find the A major arpeggio would be starting on the A string, and we can play it from here up to this A. So this octave would sound like. What if I connected it and kind of put that on repeat on a loop? So now let's do both octaves together. And just for the sake of studying the mandolin neck and learning these notes up the fretboard, let's identify again. We already looked at the scale really high up on the neck, all the way to the 17th fret. So if we were going to just identify what those arpeggio notes are up here, we've got A, C sharp, E, and then A again. I could also play this. I could put my first finger here. Of course, it's kind of cramped because these frets get small. Now, an exercise we can do just to emphasize this and really get these fingerings ingrained with our muscle memory, I can play the first set of 4 notes, the first arpeggio, right? And repeat that. So, and then we'll repeat that as it is. Now we're going to do an inversion. All these are the same A major arpeggio notes, but let's start on C sharp and then play up to this C sharp. So what we've got so far, again, keep going. If you want to exercise this and really build up your speed, you could play it like this. Okay, now that you've really focused and drilled those different groupings of the arpeggio notes, we could do the same thing but make it harder, and therefore we could learn more and get more benefit out of it if we really just played them closer together and in sequence. If we did a similar idea but descending, a term that comes to mind, people say cross-picking. Now E, C sharp. So when I play that faster, you can kind of see how cross-picking is the term because I'm crossing these different strings, right? And I could even start higher. So I can start here. And so on. So the next topic we're going to look at are the double stops. Double stops are when you play 2 notes together. So these are A major double stops. All of these are A major arpeggio notes. I'm just doing groupings of pairs of notes, right? So we've got like this, A and E, then C sharp and E, and then E and A again. Kind of, they're all different inversions. We've got this one. We've got this one. That one can be played here, up the neck. So really, this is just furthering our knowledge of where the arpeggio notes are, and then also trying to play 2 notes together at the same time. Now, what we could do with these double stops, we could also play different notes from the A scale. They don't have to be just the A arpeggio notes. So if you started out with these 2 notes, we've got C sharp and E like this. I could walk up the scale. So if I go up to the next note, the next corresponding note for both of those notes on both strings, we could say C sharp and E, and then we could play D and F sharp, and then E and G sharp, and then here we get F sharp and A. And now let's switch over to this position again. G and B, A and C sharp, B and D, and so on. Okay, a similar idea where we can take double stops and then walk that up the scale. You know, we could do this note combination right here. We're going to play the G sharp note and E. Let's start there. And the exercise here is to walk this all the way up the scale. So again, for each corresponding string, you're going to walk both notes up the A scale. So we're going to go like this. For example, and end on that C sharp. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time looking at the mechanics and the building blocks of music, right? The scales and the arpeggios and then these patterns. But how would we really apply this to making music? So I'm going to show you an example of a melodic phrase, and I want you to see where we're really just using the same arpeggio notes as our foundation for what we're doing. So I could take a shape like this, and the structure of what I'm doing, the notes that I'm landing on, the notes that I'm gravitating to, and the notes that I'm traveling through are based off of these double stop shapes and these arpeggios. And there's some passing notes in there too. Another idea would be if you took this double stop, right? I've got my E and my A note, but then I can use these kind of passing notes, other notes from the scale, where I'm holding the A the whole time, but you get this kind of sustained, raised sound, but then come back down. So you can see how I'm using this double stop, this get a little passing note in here, and then I go to this double stop, do a line, and then this double stop to end. Okay, here's another really fun pattern that just sounds so beautiful and so musical. I want to show you this. So basically I'm going to start on E. You know, we're still in the key of A major. E is the 5th note of the scale. And I'm going to do this shape, kind of like this shape right here, inspired by this. But I'm going to put a connecting note in between, and I'm going to go like this. You got that? Now go down the scale. Right? Go to G sharp here, F sharp, if I'm going to play that up to speed, it might sound like this. So a similar pattern using these double stop shapes. If we started down here, remember how we did this one and walked up the scale? Well, what if we did this 3-note pattern ascending the scale? So if I did this one a little bit faster, it might sound like this. Okay, let's make this a little bit more complicated, and let's build arpeggios off of every note in the scale. So we're going to play an arpeggio, and then we're going to go up to the next note in the scale, B, and then play an arpeggio off of that note, and so on. If I continue to do that, C sharp, then you'd have E and G sharp and C sharp. This by itself is basically a pattern, but the concept that we're doing, they are arpeggios. They are diatonic arpeggios, starting on every note of the scale. D, E, F sharp, and then G sharp, then A again. Now, if you notice, a little deeper on the theory here, each one of these arpeggios creates a different chord or a different chord quality. Essentially, is it a major chord or is it a minor chord? So A major, then immediately when we go to this B, the relationship between B and D would make it a B minor chord, right? And then if you did the same thing for C sharp, it would really be like C sharp minor. So then D would be major. E, well, it's E major. We'll get to the possibilities here in a second, but that by itself would be E major. And then F sharp would need to be an F sharp minor. And then with this G sharp, there's other ways to call this, but essentially it's got this D note in it, which means it's a flat 5. Because if it were a normal 5, it would be... That note, though, is not in the A scale. So it would be G sharp, then you have the minor third, and then the flat 5. And there's the octave. Right? Just to give you an example, if you played like an A bar chord, A major bar chord, you could do the same concept and just go up, looking at these different chord voicings walking up the scale. You could play A, then go up a whole step to starting on B. It's a B minor, C sharp minor, D major, you got E major, you've got this F sharp minor, and then if I started on, I'll jump here so you can see it better, on G sharp, this really is, that's where that flat 5 comes into play, because I have to alter my fingering a little bit to get that D note. And then there we are at A again. What if I played these arpeggios, but then I lowered the top note to where I get, for instance, on the A, I play a G sharp. So that's, I'm going to call these diatonic 7th arpeggios, where we're now playing an arpeggio that's got the 7th note of each of the corresponding scales. So the first one would be A major 7. The next one would be B minor, but with that 7. C sharp, and then D. Now this E would actually be a E7. And then we've got F sharp minor 7. And then this G sharp again. And then we've got A again. Another way I can do that would be to play in position. So before I was kind of utilizing first position, but now I'm just going to do this shape. I think it's really important to get this shape and move this up the neck like this. If I really practice each of those groups of notes, I can really get this muscle memory ingrained. So I'm going to repeat these like this. If you've followed me along up to here, this is a great time. We're going to just make this more and more complex, but we're learning more about these potential fingerings and different musical sounds that we can get on the mandolin fretboard. So if you got this shape right here, something you can do with the scale, with this arpeggio, I can play this cool pattern where I now play this A major 7 arpeggio, and then I'm going to play the same thing, but I'm going to play F sharp on top. So that might sound like... And then we're going to do the same thing for each of those position shapes. So if I play that up to speed and repeat each of those, it could sound like this. Good. Now, we're using a similar shape, this A major 7 arpeggio. But to make it a little more complicated, I want to play this C sharp note after it. So really we're going to do this exercise where we arpeggiate and then we get that third note again. So this is across 3 strings. And so we're going to do this. Okay. And then let's do the same thing on B. Then C sharp, D, so if we repeat each of these where we're emphasizing each group of notes, you could play it like this. Now, a really cool etude exercise idea that utilizes these different arpeggios from the key of A major. We're just going to do A major to E7. And I want to show you a way that you can very musically just utilize these arpeggios to make a cool musical phrase, musical idea. So I'm going to start on this A note, and we're eventually going to get down to here, but here's what this sounds like. So when I play that faster up to tempo where I'm really connecting all of these fluidly, you can hear that I'm going A major to E7, A major to E7, alternating. So faster. Another important sound when you're playing in the key of A, which is totally compatible with the A major scale, is the A major pentatonic sound. So pentatonic means that we're going to do 5 notes, just a selection of notes from that major scale, and they sound like this. So you can see we're playing the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 6th. So if you're looking at the shape that it creates, if I played it up here, it would be. So there's so many songs that are built off of the pentatonic scale. One example that comes to mind that's common in like the bluegrass world, the mandolin repertoire, this song, Angeline the Baker, right? So if you played Angeline the Baker, the melody, which starts on the E note, if you're in the key of A, it would be like. All of that melody, every note, that's all from the major pentatonic scale, right? Another interesting detail is that that group of notes, whenever you have a major pentatonic scale, if we started that group of notes on F sharp, that is the equivalent of the F sharp minor pentatonic scale, right? And that demonstrates the relationship between the relative major, so A major, and the relative minor, so the 6th minor of that key. So if I started that scale here, you can just hear that tonality, the key, that sounds like we're in a minor key. And trust me, there's a million songs that are based on the minor pentatonic scale. because I want to give you guys a lot of different information and really have a thorough understanding not only of the key of A major, but how this is applicable to playing and actually being out there in the real world when you're trying to jam and learn songs. You're likely going to be learning a lot of stuff in the bluegrass repertoire, right? The bluegrass genre. There's so much of that music that has a bluesy sound. So we're talking about changing the A major scale slightly. And I want you to learn this A7 scale, also referred to, if you think about modes, as the A mixolydian sound. So that just means where instead of playing the G sharp, I'm going to do a G natural. If you look at one of the patterns that we did earlier, you could easily replace the G sharp with a G natural. And for instance, this pattern, so we did, right? I'm just going to play G natural now. Even get that low G in there, right? That is very easy to do. I just wanted to show you this for the sake of giving you as much information as possible. That's just such a relevant sound in the key of A. So you may show up to the jam and they want to play something like Clinch Mountain Backstep or something, or right? And it's got that G natural. Now, even talking about the theory of where that comes from, you could look at that through the lens of a different diatonic scale. And maybe this is for a later day, but I'll just give you a clue right now that if you took that group of notes, that would actually come from the D major scale, right? Because it's creating an A7 sound. And remember, when we were doing all these scales over A major, we got that E7. So inherently, like the identity of whenever you have a dominant chord, like our E7, that was made up of A major notes, right? So if we played at A7, that's really like the fifth of the D major scale. So that's where that comes from. Okay, we've gone through pretty much all of these exercises and patterns that I had for A major, but I want you to have this one takeaway now. If I asked you what would be a ubiquitous song that everybody knows, maybe something like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, which is basically the same tune as the ABCs, right? I'm fairly certain that you know this song. This is a really cool exercise. If you can just think of a song that you know and then try to find it in any given key. So if I asked you, how could you play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but in the key of A major? Now, with everything we've learned, I hope you have an intuitive understanding of what the different notes in the A major scale sound like, so you can discover it for yourself. Where are those melody notes in the key of A major? I'll give you a hint. It sounds like this. Right? You can do this with so many different songs. How about Happy Birthday? I'm sure you know the melody to Happy Birthday. This one is different because we're actually going to start on a different note, not starting on the A note. We're going to start on the E note. All of these notes are from the A major scale. You get the picture.